Issue 215. We start out with it being revealed to the freedom fighters through a Northern Tundra transmission that Rotor's family has been used to build a refueling station or something. Dylan looks scared of Nicole, and here's where the awkwardness begins, as the council is clearly afraid of her at this point. I mean, the Iron Nicole situation did prove just how much power she has over a city made of nanites. She's basically a god, and it showed what would happen if she went evil. Plus, these guys haven't had any friendship moments with her, so their behavior isn't contradicting anything. They could easily go from just okay with her to afraid of her. I'm torn between hating this out of pity for Nicole, like I always did, and frustration since she's clearly not brainwashed anymore, and loving it because at least Nicole's character is being used for something interesting again. I have to wonder why they're bothering to try to lie to her since it should be obvious what's going on. To my surprise, Sonic doesn't try to go further into this and question him to stand up for his friend, as Hamlin looks unlikably resentful. He says that unless Sally and Amy find something in the egg dome, he's free to lend a hand to Rotor's family. Seriously, I'm exhausted of them by this point. They seemed to be fine, and then they were brainwashed. They were unbrainwashed, and then brainwashed again. They recovered from that, and now they're in trouble again. We've gotten the rug pulled on us where we thought they were fine, and then they weren't 3 times by this point. And I've been given no development on their culture or the personalities of Rotor's parents to have a reason to care about them. They've just gotten in trouble over and over again and need the heroes to bail them out. Sonic assumes Rotor will come along with them, even though he was never the same after his back was hurt millions of issues ago, but I immediately became on Sonic's side anyways when it turns out that Hamlin is against Sonic's idea. I love that Sonic acts rebellious and resentful of the jerk, saying, wasn't asking for your permission there, Hamlin. It's such a gutsy thing to say to someone with power over you. That's true bravery. Surprisingly, Rotor says that his place is here without even bothering to explain his reasoning to Sonic, and yet Sonic agrees happily to humor him for no reason. Is Rotor lying so that he can sneak along with them? I mean, he's shown on the title page fighting alongside Sonic. Though this wouldn't be the first time that the title page blatantly lied to you and made me long for what could have been. Sonic says that he'll just grab a couple of rings and be on his way, and then Rotor whispers to Nicole to meet up with him in private. Later, at the Northern Tundra, Sonic shows up to the guy who sent the message the other day, explaining that he didn't show up right away because he was busy in the cat country. Sonic then reveals that rings make you immune to hypothermia. Considering they provide invincibility, that does actually make sense. Hey, maybe that's why Sonic doesn't need to wear a coat when he's running around cold places. The guy I don't recognize leads Sonic into the base of the Arctic Freedom Fighters. The only ones I recognize are the French seal and the aggressive polar bear. Sonic says that he thought he heard about them breaking up, and the guy explains that they're originally just an activist group and weren't officially freedom fighters when they first met. And the girl complains that some of them wanted to be more proactive and glares at him tensely, implying that she resents him for wanting to be a hero. I smell a traitor. Too bad that's never actually going to happen because that would be actually interesting. The guy says that as Eggman started tightening his grip up here, they all agreed to come back and fight for the Northern Tundra, as we see the girls smirk evilly, though the Penguin's doing that too. It's more like they're smirking because they hate Eggman. The girl, Irma, shows Sonic a plan saying that thanks to some searching, they know that Eggman's base there is both above and below the ice. She tells him that the Legionnaires run the lower portion of the base, and the Walrus slaves run the upper half. So is the lower portion of the base... Well, actually that will be explained. Apparently the Legion has sonar that can be cybernetically boosted because that makes total sense, and she says that between that and the emitter in the top of the tower, the herd has no way to resist the mind control signals. They've been mind controlled how many times by now? You'd think at this point they would have gotten the hint to get the hell out of here. They're too attached to their home, I guess. The Penguin says that he, Celia, and Augustus can handle the underwater portion, and that leaves Sonic, Gunterver, and Irma to handle things on land. Irma agrees with Sonic with a smirk, and after a page of recap, Rotor asks Nicole to use her nanites to build something for him. I wish he could explain that he's asking this because he thinks he couldn't do it himself, that maybe the nanites would be better at making certain machines requiring very precise small tools or whatever to be made. Wouldn't this make Nicole sort of the better mechanic? Even if she can't do it the traditional way that counts. Nicole shows moral responsibilities, saying that she's not comfortable with using the nanites anymore because after what she did as Iron Nicole, she worries about abusing her control. Considering that she actually wasn't brainwashed for most of it, it makes sense that she would feel guilty and blame herself a bit for what she was doing. But she should be easier on herself about it since she was forced to do it anyways to avoid blowing her cover. More importantly, how is this abusing her nanite powers? She's helping her friend. Rhoda reassures her that everyone's still spooked after the Nicole incident and they'll calm down eventually. And he says that nobody will know about this anyways. Nicole agrees that this will be their little secret. Yeah. Rhoda says that he lied to shut Hamlin up. Nicole worries about him being caught, and Rhoda says that with that design, he'll be gone and back before the sun sets. He lampshades that he's been away from the adventuring for too long, and puts on a battlesuit that looks a lot stupider than I'd imagined it to be from what I heard about it, as it looks more like a footballer's outfit than the grey metallic battlesuit I thought it'd be. I was picturing something like Bunny's armor from that one side story. Rhoda rockets off, and thinks about the time when Sonic was up in space. He had naturally tried to fill the void he left behind by making even bigger, badder weapons, as we see him riding in a spider mecha much like Eggman would make with fire behind him. Oh, I remember hearing about this. This was controversial apparently. Rhoda explains that he went overboard, and while he took out plenty of badniks, he had gone too far and almost took out the freedom fighters as well. With all the fire from his inventions around, that would make sense. But that's no excuse to stop being useful. Perhaps traumatized by the incident or bad luck, rather than simply not making any fire-related inventions anymore, he vowed to never build another weapon again. And we see a flashback of him stupidly telling Fiona to not use guns against robots, as he thinks that he made a hypocrite out of himself more than once. Yeah, especially since he used guns. I think less people might have bitched about this whole revelation if it had been revealed by Rhoda in the first few issues after Sonic had come back from space. Instead, it comes completely out of nowhere, long after the fact. I was under the impression that he was still building weapons to help his friends the entire time and had never stopped. Now it's officially confirmed that he's been basically useless the whole time. Sure, he's been making harmless inventions, but nothing that would say, let the freedom fighters who can't fight robots fight them. You'd think he'd have learned by now that refusing to make ray guns for characters like Sally and Antoine would just risk them almost being killed. Just like before. I'd understand if his reasoning was that he didn't want to be too much like Eggman, because in that mecha he certainly looks like a successor to him. I'd understand if he complained that his inventions were burning down forests or causing pollution or something and he stopped because he's a nature lover, and again doesn't want to be like Eggman. Instead, he's still fixated on one mistake he made from recklessness that he should have gotten over by now from seeing the consequences of his refusing to help his friends for so long. He thinks back briefly to when he built the Metal Sonic Troopers. So apparently that was an additional reason for him to arbitrarily stop making weapons to help. But he should have known later on that Snively had reprogrammed them. It's not his fault, which I'm really surprised they still haven't confirmed that was him. Much like how they never confirmed that Snively was responsible for Sonic's nightmare sequence in issue 52 or 51, I don't remember which. I really hope the reboot Rotor did away with this pacifist sketch-tier nonsense. Rotor, instead of getting over it finally, since he was reflecting on it, thinks that he'll really retire after all this is said and done, even though he had been pretending to retire earlier. And I love that Sonic actually lampshades how much Rotor's herd gets kidnapped. Maybe the herd will stay rescued this time. Irma says snarkily that Eggman's always after them because they're the most prominent species in the northern tundra, and because the city of Iceboro is the most influential settlement in the polar ice cap. Sonic says sarcastically, "Really?" Or at least I hope that's sarcastic, because you shouldn't be surprised by this at all. You'd think Irma would have pointed out the obvious fact that Eggman's doing this to target Rotor's family, or species in general. Sonic then makes some annoying ice puns straight out of Colors or Boom, and the fact that the people around him are annoyed by these out-of-place jokes only barely makes it easier to deal with. After Sonic simply points out that there's some nasty weather coming up from the south, I guess he always knows which way is north to know the direction it's coming from. I guess he got special training to learn that. Irma glares at him and says that he's not focusing, being totally disrespectful and ungrateful for his help. It's official, Fiona as a freedom fighter is more likable than her. I really hope that Irma turns traitor just so that she can stop being treated like the good guy. It certainly seems to be foreshadowed here with her being a bitch. At least I'm finally interested in one of the Arctic heroes for once. I expected her to be snarky about how it's always bad weather here and Sonic shouldn't bother commenting on it like an annoying Captain Obvious. but she just calls him easily distracted when she should know how powerful and useful he is to the team, but she's treating him like complete garbage. When Rotor falls out of the sky, he gets attacked by Silver, and the nanites for him go offline. Way to go, Silver. How did you even know it was Rotor in the suit anyways? Did he spy on him with his time travel, seeing him from the other end of the portal, and see him get given the suit by Nicole? Silver tediously says that he's not the real Boomer Walrus. Wait, that's really his last name? Walrus? Not even a "the" in there? That's so lazy. Whatever. Basically, he goes after him for being a traitor because he thinks he's not the real Rotor. I guess because he started going by Rotor instead of Boomer, and so Silver assumed he had replaced the old Rotor. And Silver doesn't have enough information on Rotor from his ruined future to know that he's been holding back as a pacifist for several months now, and thus would never even unintentionally become the traitor who destroys the Freedom Fighters. Also, I'd like to point out that Silver even claiming the Freedom Fighters got that fate, and coming from a doomed future because of it all, directly contradicts everything established about the future from In Your Face onwards, which shows it being at peace with the Freedom Fighters adult and alive and well. So how can Silver, believing what he does, possibly make sense when it never happened in the first place? The only way I would fully accept this is if it was revealed that Silver's actually just from another dimension and only thinks that he's time traveling. Either way, Silver better not make it impossible for Rotor to help save his family when he just tried to help on a mission for the first time in forever, because he's really looking unlikable right now. Silver probably doesn't have enough information to go off of to know about the evil Rotor calling himself Boomer. That's the whole thing with him, he's just going off little information because of his doomed future. But the problem is that he can time travel to any point that he wants. So he should be able to get any amount of information he wants as accurately as possible by time traveling all sorts of different points in time. His whole concept makes absolutely no sense. He's just the definition of an arbitrary villain, because if he was working with two brain cells instead of controlled by the writer to be an antagonist, he'd have gone to the point in time where the Freedom Fighters supposedly got destroyed by continuously time traveling, and saved them, and seen who the traitor was himself. Or, if he's in the wrong dimension, he should have gone to the future of this Mobius and realized it was peaceful and all the Freedom Fighters were alive and well. But instead, he's dumber than Knuckles ever was. And he met Lara Sue, so he should know that they're all gonna be fine. Meanwhile, in a second story, 200 years from now on Ong's Island, Silver thinks to himself that he'll have to thank Edmund for letting him do his research here, as we see the future Freedom Fighters, with Lara Sue on a painting on the wall. Wait, does this mean that maybe the traitor he was looking for was actually among the future Freedom Fighters? No, that gets contradicted later when his plot is resolved. And I got the implication that Vector's son died since Sonic said he'd be with him in spirit, and that's the context people say that in. So I had to get a picture taken with him out there. Unless this is all the more proof that this is an alternate dimension where he did survive. Or I guess Vector's son took his time to come over there just so that they can get a picture with him. And that Edmund fellow, was he a descendant of Knuckles? At first I wondered that was the original Edmund, but that couldn't make sense. Anyways, we see Silver reading a book saying that Rotor used to be called Boomer. You'd think a book telling him about the history of the first Freedom Fighters would tell him that Boomer was Rotor's old nickname. But, well, maybe it did and he closed the book right away, but you'd think the book would have explained this literally just a few words afterwards, or phrased it as Rotor, who went by Boomer back then. This is very arbitrary conflict, another example of Flynn's writing being contrived, as it forces the concept to happen despite all logic. I mean, at least with a plot hole I can immediately try to figure out a better explanation. Plot holes make me think, contrivedness just makes me rant. That's not even pointing out the fact that they weren't the first Freedom Fighters. The first ones were adults who got sent into the Zone of Silence after making the incredible historical contribution of having Knothole as a village be built in the first place. You'd think their memories would live on instead of being ignored by history, unless again, this is all more proof that Silver comes from a different dimension like in some of the games. Silver decides not to go talk to his master about what he discovered and go back in time himself, explaining that he thinks he doesn't need a super warp ring this time because he's confident in using the power of the time stones now. Good, they're using the proper logical explanation for why Silver can time travel that a lot of people suggested for 06. Problem is, 06 still made more sense. Because at least Mephiles being in total control of where he sent Silver explained why Silver didn't just time travel to the exact point where he thought the bad thing would happen and prevent it there. Since Silver himself couldn't time travel, he was relying on someone else to do it for him. But yeah, he apparently needed a super warp ring to augment or control better the time stones, because that's totally necessary. That makes perfect sense. I mean, wouldn't you just need either one or the other? Silver briefly agonizes over whether it's right to kill someone to save the world, and fortunately he realizes on his own that he's being stupid, and without even needing Blaze this time, and warps away as we see a statue of Lara Sue in the background looking oddly menacing. This issue is by Ian Flynn. I really wasn't expecting Silver to turn on Rotor and try to cheat him out of protecting his family, when he was being useful to the action again finally. Rotor fans must have really felt gypped by this point. Silver's being really aggravating here. Again, he's only here through the power of plot holes, as there's no reason he couldn't have time traveled to the exact point where the betraying happened, or at least time traveled enough to learn to not be confused by Rotor's name change. Also, I'm sure a lot of controversy was caused over the revelation that Rotor almost killed the Freedom Fighters with his invention when Sonic was in space. My problem isn't with that in particular. It makes perfect sense that things will go haywire eventually, and this wouldn't be the first time that Rotor's invention screwed up. There was even a whole side story about Rotor's failed inventions being reminisced about by his friends. Making one mistake doesn't mean Rotor's being portrayed as a total dumbass. He's allowed to make mistakes, you know. The problem I have is that out of nowhere, Rotor decided he was so traumatized by the screw-up that he'd never build another weapon again. First off, I never got the impression that he had made that decision until now, so he was being practically useless ever since Sonic left for space. What a wonderful direction to take for one of the original Freedom Fighters. Second, he should have learned he was being stupid by now, when Sally would get hurt or something like that from not having any ray guns to protect herself with. Third, this wouldn't have felt as bullshit if this had been revealed right after Sonic came back from space and Rotor got over the pacifist nonsense in a quick character arc. But instead it's suddenly revealed out of nowhere long afterwards. Fourth, Rotor's reasoning for not building weapons like that again would have worked better if it was about him not wanting to be compared to Eggman, or maybe he burned a section of the Great Forest by accident and he's a nature lover. So many problems with this pacifist decision is absolutely ridiculous, and it's to the point where it greatly overshadows the problem of Nicole being feared in comparison. I mean, at least that makes some kind of sense. Even if they should know she's not brainwashed anymore, it's back to being a hero now. Because hero or not, she's still basically a god, who could turn on them again for all they know. And the Iron Nicole thing must have been pretty traumatizing for people. That doesn't really... I mean, that's kind of an emotional thing, not a logical thing. And at least with me feeling sorry for Nicole, I'm feeling something from her character, so she's actually interesting and I'm invested in her character finally. Also, I kind of love that Irma's such a bitch and acts like she's mad that the Arctic Freedom Fighters become heroes here. At least I'm interested in her now, and maybe this is foreshadowing to her turning traitor later. In the second story, which I almost forgot about in the summary, just has a backstory for why Silver turned on Rotor. It was pretty pointless, only causing me to get even more confused over the inconsistency of Lara Sue being blatantly on a wall in his future, when the whole reason his future is the way it is because the Freedom Fighters were destroyed long before Lara Sue could even be born.